Great. So let's see. Let me just check real quick. I'm going to mute myself if I can, but I want to check that it's going on YouTube. Okay, sorry guys. Well, what is up? If anyone is tuning in to watch us right now, welcome guys. I'm Cody McKibben from Foundry. This is a test of the emergency broadcast system for the Foundry. Rico, what's up, man? I see you there. Yeah, so this is a test run. First time we're using it. So this is called StreamYard. You guys probably see that now that you're in here, Jim and Zach, but this is a new live broadcast software I've been trialing a little bit lately. So anyhow, we're just going to broadcast mostly to, the inner core of my community at the Hero Foundry, which is all people working on personal development and building businesses and stuff like that. And we may have a few people tuning in to watch live on YouTube, but if not, I'll probably repackage this up later. But anyhow, we are gonna, it's a weird week, at least for me here. I can't wait to hear what's going on for you guys, where you are. So we'll probably get to the whole coronavirus conversation. But first, I guess, let me, if I may, these are two of my favorite people in the world, Jim Batcho, Zachary Stockill. Both of you guys are published authors. Both of you guys are some of the smartest people that I know. We've each kind of mixed and mingled and traveled together in several different countries. And so I've, over the years, gotten to know, I think, both of you pretty well, and, had lots and lots of fun times. And so I am really, really honored. Thank you guys both for making the time to be here and, try out this new system with me and have an interesting conversation. The topic I wanted to dig into with both you guys is, really it's about art in the world, the art of culture. You're both writers, you're both musicians, and so I really would like to explore a little bit about your hero's journey you have each been on as far as your career. But would you guys mind giving just a quick introduction in your own words? Zach, do you want to kick us off and just tell us what you're about, what you're doing?
Yeah, and the first thing I'll say is self-published author. And that's a choice. I mean, we could get into that later if you want, the reasoning behind that, because I actually think that's kind of an interesting topic. But yeah, self-published. Long story short, I mean, for most of my early life and into my early 20s, I thought I was going to become a history professor. I spent years in university studying mostly modern history, 20th century, post-colonial history, and went to graduate school. Before then, I'd started traveling. I moved to India for a year when I was 19, and that really changed me in a lot of ways, really opened my eyes up to the wider world outside of my native Canada. And I mean, at the risk of sounding cliched, I kind of got the travel bug. And from there on, I figured out how to get grants and how to spend increasingly long periods of time outside of Canada, for many reasons, one of which I detest the Canadian winter, and that hasn't changed. And just in general, I found that travel really sort of, brought a great deal to my life and was influencing me in some really positive ways, I felt. So anyways, long story short, after graduate school, or actually during graduate school, as I was finishing up, I wrote a very short book called Overcoming Retroactive Jealousy, which dealt with some challenges that I'd faced around jealousy and possessiveness in my relationships as a young man. And to my surprise, it started selling modestly. And I found the work that I was doing around jealousy and personal development and helping men and women enjoy better relationships and just everything that I was learning, I was starting to find that far more attractive and appealing to focus on rather than my work in the academy. So I took a year and I decided to focus on business for a year, and that was, I guess, 7 years ago. And ever since then, I've been putting out podcasts and YouTube videos, and I've got an online course, and I put out a couple more books, all in the general field of personal development and love and intimate relationships. So today, my main projects are a website called retroactivejealousy.com, where I put out content that hopefully helps people start to let go of jealousy and possessiveness in their relationships. I have a podcast called Humans in Love, which Jim, our friend Jim, has been on a couple of times. And yeah, that's sort of my main focus right now. I also do some one-on-one coaching, and I'm still traveling. I'm speaking to you today from beautiful Bali, Indonesia.
That's cool, man. Well, yeah, thank you for sharing your story. One of your books after the initial one was called Everyday Joy.
Yeah.
Correct? And
Yeah.
I really did enjoy that one. What's the subtitle? You're going to have to remind me.
How to be happier, healthier, and party all the time. That was a book I wrote when I was, how old was I? I was partying a lot. Well, I was living with you. We were living in Colombia.
It was my fault.
Partying a lot. Yeah.
I'll take the blame.
Yeah, it has some nice passages. I have an interesting relationship to that little book now. I'm not sure I'd publish it today, but it's fun. I mean, it's a product of my life. It's a snapshot of my life in that particular time, and it was fun to write. And yeah, it's very much the book written by a 25-year-old, 24-year-old, or however old I was.
I think it was a good message, though, generally speaking. But I
stand by the underlying philosophy. Absolutely. This is one of the interesting things. I'd like to talk to you about this, Jim, as well. Like, our work as younger people, because I mean, when we're in the creative field, I mean, depending on which exact field we're in, I feel like a lot of musicians tend to peak around 25, 30. You might have a different take on that. I mean, that's generally the way it seems to go. Writers, it seems to me, mature later. Not always. I think novelists maybe peak around the same time as musicians and stuff, but particularly like nonfiction writers, to my mind at least, tend to peak later in life. So not that I'm suggesting that I'm anywhere near peaking or I have a peak to reach or anything like that, but it's interesting sometimes reading your earlier work and reflecting on that and how you've changed and how you haven't changed, and the odd cringeworthy sentence and all the rest. It's kind of an interesting exercise. Humbling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's definitely, I've had my own cringeworthy moments in my career and my work. I think that sort of goes with the territory. In terms of age, though, I think, you're probably at your best when you have something to say and you're in the moment when you're ready to produce something from that, and that could be any age. I think there's some writers
with age, but it's sometimes.
Yeah, well, there's probably some combination of that. Like, a writer needs a certain amount of experience to, I think, have something to say, even though there's been writers who at age 20 have written remarkable works, whereas music, I think it's something that's, it's ineffable. It doesn't need a certain language. It's just something that is maybe more immediate form of expression. So maybe that's where that comes in, and there's also kind of writing is a more reflective kind of process, and music is maybe a bit more of an instinctual, rebellious animal kind of thing going on. But these are just generalities, it depends on where someone is in one's life and how you're producing the work, I guess.
Sure.
Okay, so this is a really interesting conversation thread line, and I want to kind of pursue it further. But first, Jim, let me give you an opportunity here. Would you, give yourself an introduction and share kind of the academic side, the creative side, the professional side of what you have been creating with your life the last couple decades?
Sure. Well, it's interesting to think about when one's going to begin talking about one story, right? I suppose a big leap for me was moving to South Korea, where I got a job teaching at a university, teaching film sound design. I was going to go for 1 year, and I ended up staying almost 7 years. And I've been in Asia now for about 12 years, I guess, teaching at universities. And I took some breaks here and there. I got my PhD at the European Graduate School, and in between, sort of being in South Korea and then later being in Chiang Mai, Thailand, where I met Zach and hung out with you, Cody. I was doing my PhD and doing my PhD dissertation research, and that was on sort of a bringing together cinema, concepts of hearing and listening, and concepts of memory and time in a narrative context. So this was the bulk of my research, informed by continental philosophy. And so that's kind of been that initial research that I was doing for my PhD really kind of exploded me in a whole other area of, you know, thinking about things and working on essays and books. And so I finished my book, Terrence Malick's Unseeing Cinema, 2 years ago. And right now I'm almost done with a manuscript on a book called Audibility, Essays in Hearing and Listening. And both of these are informed by continental philosophy. And then within that, there's always music, and music's been a thread since I've been very young. I play drums, and I've been playing in bands kind of all over the place, all kinds of different styles. But the music and sort of the philosophical concepts that I've been writing very often kind of overlap. So that's kind of an interesting area as well. So that's kind of some of the stuff that I've been working on. And like you guys, traveling around, finding homes in different locations, soaking up the atmosphere, learning as much of the culture as you can, meeting people. It's been kind of an interesting life.
Absolutely, hasn't it? I mean, yeah, I remember, I think it was during our time, well, my time in Berlin. I'm sure you were there on and off several times, but I remember having many pretty lengthy philosophical conversations with you, and yeah, just about I mean, a lot about film, right? But storytelling and stuff. And I think that's where there's an interesting overlap with both of you guys, because you're both storytellers. You're both, you know, have a very well-developed academic background. You both create music, you know, obviously, as well as written works. So yeah, you know, with the Hero Foundry, the community that I've been building is still in very, very early stages. Not that it's brand new, but yeah, like developing this idea for the last 2 or 3 years. The focus that I guess the area that I'm focused on more and more is the study of storytelling, you know? And I think, and that was where the recent, like the release of the what's it called? No Time to Die, the new James Bond film, you know, like from a storytelling perspective, from the, you know, bringing in the right kind of music that sets the tempo, that pulls the emotional strings, and then also how that's connected into like the real life dialogue we now have going on, you know, with this coronavirus going around the world and the response to it. Yeah, I just figured this would be a really fascinating opportunity to get the two of you, to share your perspectives on. I guess I'd like to steer the conversation. I do want to talk about, you know, how serious things are getting in many places around the world. And by the way, Jim, you're in Taiwan, right? You're calling from Taiwan today?
Yeah, I should add, I'm in Kaohsiung, Taiwan right now, and I teach for a university called Isho University, and I'm teaching film studies and storytelling classes. So, and everything's great here. I think we just hit 53 cases. Taiwan has been really, really effective in kind of shutting things down. On the bad side, it's sort of cut off travel, so I can't go anywhere, or rather, if I go somewhere, I can't come back. But we're really safe here. People are, you know, walking around with masks, but like it was funny. I was just at the store yesterday at the mall, and they're selling toilet paper on sale. And I thought that was hilarious. They've got it there advertised, you know, 25% discount on toilet paper. It was just kind of funny. But anyway, yeah, things are pretty good here in Taiwan. I just can't move outside.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And actually, things are, I'll share more detail later, but things are I think they're approaching a similar state here where I am in the Philippines, the whole, because we're starting a provincial quarantine tomorrow officially. And yeah, most of the air traffic and boat traffic and even the buses, like pretty much everything's going shut down for until further notice. But you know, so hopefully that's a good thing in the big picture. But anyhow, yeah, to bring it back, another thing to mention though, yeah, Jim, you've spent a considerable amount of time, I think, in and around China and Hong Kong, and you know, so you've got a pretty good finger on the pulse, I guess, of things going on in that part of the world, where I think a lot of our viewers may never have even visited China or Asia yet. So again, you know, it's like it's the perfect time to talk about the thing that everyone is talking about. But yeah, I do want to stay grounded in your guys' you know, area of expertise and your experience. So before we end up kind of on that end of the discussion, let's just, I would love to I guess invite either one of you, whoever wants to jump in. But yeah, like what drew you to a creative career, you know, the creative realm, expressing yourself through music, deciding to embrace you know, I think most people know a writing career, while it's a very respectable one, it's not always the simplest or the most fruitful. You know, it can be a very difficult slog, right? But I think both of you are people who have something more meaningful to share, and so you choose to share that through whatever chosen medium. But yeah, what was it that originally drew you guys towards, I guess, the more creative fields?
Jim, you want to take the lead?
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I'm just worried. I love the villa where I'm staying, but my roommate is playing pop music. Can you guys hear it, or
No, we can't hear it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, you're good.
She has good taste in music, but the bad news is the walls are thin. Well, I'd be curious to hear your take on this, Jim. But I mean, I think for me, just speaking personally, I mean, in terms of just why I, you know, was drawn to creative expression and eventually making my living through creative expression of some kind. I mean, there's all the stories. I mean, my parents said that I basically came out of my mother's womb dancing and just having a very visceral, almost like I couldn't help myself, just reaction to music and rhythm. And like, you know, there'd be a commercial on the television with like a catchy pop song and I'd be like moving even as a baby and stuff. So my entire life, I mean, I just had a very, very strong, visceral, sensual experience when it came to music. And that remains true today. I mean, music is, you know, the great love of my life in a lot of ways. And it's given me so much. And I think to a certain extent, I was just born with that kind of interest and that kind of passion. In terms of just more, you know, writing and other forms of creative expression, I think to produce anything of real value in terms of, you know, writing or podcasts or YouTube videos, I mean, it takes a hell of a lot of work. But again, I think that a lot of it comes down to, you know, these instincts that we have very, very young. I mean, I remember being really young and really, really liking the first writing exercises I was exposed to in elementary school. There were public speaking competitions in Canada where I was growing up, and like, you know, I competed in. I was successful in a lot of those competitions at a very early age. And so I think a lot of this stuff, to a certain extent, you're born with it. And again, it takes a hell of a lot of work to get any good at any of this. But I think that you know, a big part of finding your way as an adult, hopefully, if you're trying to find out, you know, what should you do with your life, or which career path should you pursue, or whatever. Like, I think it's worthwhile to get in touch with those just basic childhood instincts and the things that came relatively easy to you and the things that you had a lot of fun doing as a child. I think Joseph Campbell says, "Find your bliss." I think you know, finding your bliss, like what appealed to you as a child, you know, what was your bliss as a child, has a lot of value. So, yeah, I mean, short answer, I think a lot of the stuff I was born with. But what's been your experience, Jim?
Yeah, I think it's similar to you, in that the things that you're sort of born into and that you have an inclination towards when you're a child kind of stick with you. You know, it's, you know, like psychoanalysis will tell you that when you're an adult, you're still dealing with all of the things that you have as a child, and all of the things that, those instinctual things never leave you. And for me, it was kind of similar to you, Zach. Music was very much part of my early upbringing. My mom played piano. My dad would play all the Motown songs, and the next door neighbor would have wine parties and play Pink Floyd albums, and sort of my mom played, the Russian composers. All of this sort of feeds into early childhood memories, and then also going to the cinema a lot and watching films at a very young age. That affected me as well. I think in terms, then you're sort of deciding what you want to do and what things you want to focus on. For me, I've been torn in these different areas of writing and music and film, and then being torn in this kind of these three directions, also being torn by the necessities of earning an income and the desires of wanting to create art. Those are, so you kind of get pulled in these different directions. But for me, it's interesting to hear you, Zach, talk about the idea of sensation, because in my research and my writing I'm doing right now is to elevate the importance of sensation in an age of a lot of data and a lot of information and a lot of reliance on facts and information. We seem to be losing out on sort of our contact with our more sensual sense of being, and that's something that I'm really trying to study. That's why I'm very much interested in hearing and listening, sort of the non-visual, the non-linguistic aspects of being alive. All of this kind of ties together. I think I'm sort of kind of this factory for all of these very young experiences, childhood experiences, and then being a rational adult trying to work through the world around me, and it all kind of comes together.
I don't want to hijack the conversation, but I have to ask. So my time, in university, you talk about you're interested in studying sensation and just the importance of and the significance of bodily sensations and stuff. My time in the academy and in graduate school and university, I've never met people more disconnected from their bodies and living just more 100% in their heads, and relying 100% on their intellect to process seemingly everything, whether it was emotions or trauma or ego. It's all up here. What are your thoughts on that? I don't meet a lot of academics who have any kind of real, for lack of a better word, embodiment.
Sorry to jump in, but I think when I met you, Zach, in Chile in 2013, you actually were, I got to say, I was guilty of that myself. I think, I got a lot of benefits from my university education, but I think just the focus on higher education and then just diving into a career, and I think, as you say, it transforms the way people's minds work, or the way they our habits, and I was definitely very guilty of that, just being almost 100% up here and very, as you say, disconnected. And I found, with your help, meditation was a very big game changer for me. But I think definitely, I think almost everyone could benefit from a creative outlet. But what is your take, Jim, on what do you guys think is the role, I guess, for the arts and for the artists, in helping people at this time in history?
Well, just to go back to what Zach was saying, I think to give kind of, we have to look at the intellectual history a little bit. There's the Enlightenment, which was a response to, kind of a more spiritual tradition, which said that, our strength is in our sense of reason and being reasonable and being rational. And fast forward a little bit, and then you come up with two of the key breakthroughs in Western thinking, which is Darwin and Freud, and Darwin telling us that we're still animals, and Freud kind of saying the same thing. We think of ourselves. So you've got this Enlightenment kind of idea that we're supposed to be rational, reasonable people. And then you've got this kind of Freudian way of saying that, no, we're not rational. We have no idea what we're thinking. And so there's this, I think this conflict remains relevant today. So I think there's that demand to kind of stay rational and stay facts oriented and stay information oriented. I think it's sort of a further extension of that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But then Cody, what was your question again? I mean, I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that, but there's maybe a couple of things going on at the same time.
There's a lot of things.
Yeah. Sorry to throw the academic.
Well, I do feel that we live in such a mediated environment now.
That's the other thing.
I think that the existence of social media. I mean, even if you could possibly exclude political things, but you're just so bombarded. It brings good, but we are so bombarded by everyone else's data points all the time, right? And now we're forced to. It's like we're rubbing up against each other even more because everyone sees everyone else's facts or information, and so we're comparing against one another, and I don't. Yeah, it's an interesting information environment to be in, but we've I guess when you're looking at numbers on a screen, you're not thinking about the sights and the feelings and the sounds in the present moment where you are, right?
It's interesting. I like the way you phrase that. You said we're rubbing up against each other's kind of experiences, but in a way that is really through two kind of faculties. We see people's words, we see people's text, and we see people's images. And that's all we get. And so there's this distancing that feels like closeness, but it's not. And so what we're rubbing up against is this very highly mediated and carefully constructed appearance that people choose to present.
Yeah.
And so again, it's this very rational, I'm a rational person, and sort of here's my outrage, or here's my contribution, or here's my clever thing that I'm saying, and that's what I'm going to offer. But it's missing out on the sensorial aspect. So I mean, we can angle this towards expressions of art. We can angle this towards the importance of travel. Because travel, you're forced to see things in different ways that you're not going to see over a screen. You have to immerse yourself in environments. So there's some connection there with expressing art, and just I think travel is, kind of not that different from having an artistic experience in a way, because there's something very cinematic to it, and there's something very sensual to it that you're not going to get over someone's statements and someone's screens. That's a very limited way of seeing things.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. What do you think along those lines, Zach? I mean, I know in my experience, I believe that just the fact that I chose to go travel the world and then stay overseas as long as I could and become an expat, etc. I mean, crossing paths with so many different people and immersing myself in different cultures has certainly shaped the way I look at the world, of course, right, and influenced what I guess what I'm trying to accomplish, with my work in the long run. What do you think, Zach? I mean, you guys are both very well traveled. How has that influenced or shaped your expression, or just your pursuits, I guess, with your art, with your creation?
Well, I mean, it's such a difficult question to answer because I think I've spent the majority of I've definitely spent the majority of my adult life outside of Canada, and really formative, important years when you're forming your personality and who you are and what you want and what you stand for and what you don't. And so, I mean, my experience of being a quote unquote expat is foundational to my adulthood, to my personality. So it's a really, really tough question to answer. I remember when I was 19, I moved to India for a year, and I landed. I'll never forget, at Delhi airport, and I'd never been outside of North America before. And I was moving to India for a year, and I thought I was pretty cool, and I thought I was pretty tough, and I landed. I mean, anyone who's been to New Delhi, can recall the absolute chaos on the streets, and there's cow shit everywhere, and there's diesel fumes, and there's people trying to rip you off, and the traffic is insane. And you in the back of the rickshaw thinking you're going to die, and someone's going to swipe you and rob. Like, it's an absolute bombardment of the senses. And I went back to my hotel, and I think I had a slight cry, and I didn't leave my hotel room for a day. And so, even just experiences like that. I mean, India has, I could spend an hour just talking about India. I mean, India has so much to teach, and it's such just a visceral, jarring, challenging, beautiful, stunningly ugly, it's just the most quote unquote intense, or, for lack of a better term, intense place on the planet that I've experienced. I mean, there's just the absolute extremes of the human condition there. You have really, really just stunningly beautiful art and architecture, and then the most just visually unappealing, sensually unappealing stuff in the world as well. It's a land of extremes. And I think just putting myself in of environments that were just really challenging, because I mean, my first trips in India, I traveled on I was a student, so I traveled on a pretty modest budget, and just putting yourself in more of these situations, it can't help but force you to grow. I mean, all the cliches hold true about this kind of long-term travel. You realize that people are pretty much the same. Now, of course, there are extremes, there are outliers. I believe there are some pretty nasty, bad people out there, as much as they're really beautiful, loving souls. But people in general are pretty much the same. People want the same things. People want a better life for their children. People want to eat. People love their mothers. People love their family. And so I knew all that, but just being in, South America and India and China and Thailand and, everywhere I've spent significant periods of time, it really shoves that in your face a lot more. I mean, I don't think I was ever a racist or prejudiced person, but I think Mark Twain has that quote about travel being fatal to any kind of ethnic or racial prejudice. I mean, you realize that people are pretty much the same. And for me, I think just being in particularly Asia, being exposed to more ideas about Buddhism and Eastern philosophy more generally has just really changed the ways that I process the world and the way that I carry myself in general. And I think my stress levels in general, when I'm, even in a Buddhist country like Thailand, are just kind of less. I always have a bit of a strange experience when I go back to Canada nowadays. It's I mean, I'm sure you guys can both relate, but at a certain point, if you spend enough time outside of your home country, you have this weird feeling of not quite belonging anywhere. And I'm a Canadian. I'm a proud Canadian in many ways, and I love Canada. And there's so many enormous benefits to living and being in Canada. But it's a bizarre thing. I'm in a weird point in my life, right now, because I've been out of Canada so long, but now I'm thinking about maybe looking at some real estate there and establishing some ties again. But it's a funny thing, this expat life. Hope that doesn't sound glib.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. Only I would put it in my case at least. Yeah, feeling almost as like a foreigner in your own home country.
Sure.
If you spend long enough away. And yeah, I spent about 15 years, quote unquote homeless. I'm not having a place I would call home until recently. So this is a weird feeling now too, feeling at home in a place for once.
I'd just like to add one thing, if you'll permit me. I mean, one thing that kind of makes me crazy about expats and long-term travelers is a certain, and you guys can tell me what you think of this, but a certain snobbery that I perceive. Like, oh, I'm so well traveled, and I'm not like the sheep at home, and I've had this interesting life, and people back in my hometown are just staying there, and there's a kind of condescension and a snobbery that I really detest. And I want to be clear, I'm not like, I'm not trying to say that I have more things figured out or that I'm better or anything like that whatsoever. I love my friends back in Canada, and they have, incredibly interesting lives as well in their own ways. Like my good friend of mine just became a mother, and like, wow, that blows my mind. Like, it's just different challenges, I guess. But I that really bothers me when you talk to a lot of long-term travelers and expats, and they speak about the people back home in kind of a condescending way. That kind of makes me crazy. So I just want to be clear that I'm not trying to be one of those obnoxious people.
You need to be more obnoxious, Zach. This whole podcast is about cancel Zach.
Right. My tirades will begin soon. Don't worry.
Well, you're right. I mean, everyone is on an epic journey of some kind, even if they don't leave, their hometown, right? Everyone has everyone's on some path.
Sure.
But definitely for the three of us, yeah, travel has been a large part of each of ours, I'm sure.
Yeah.
What were we going to say, Jim? You want to add something?
No, it's on top of what Zach was saying. There's also the very annoying expat who lives in another country, who kind of is dismissive of the culture in which they live. So kind of the opposite of what Zach is saying.
Yeah.
And these are the people who drive me crazy. Is the people who live in another country and feel trapped there. It's a little different from your guys' experience, I think, because what you guys do is fairly mobile. But when I was living in Korea, a lot of the professors that I knew obviously felt trapped there, and would kind of talk shit about the country that is giving them a home, an adopted home. And, they kind of forget the idea that they're invited to be there. This is not their culture. They would really be dismissive and complain that things aren't like the West. And
100%. Completely agree.
My attitude to that is, if this isn't working for you, get out. Right.
Yeah.
If it's not something that's giving you value or giving you, like Cody, you say, like if it's not putting you on some kind of journey or not helping you in some way, then stop complaining and go back home. And maybe that's me being a snob as well, but I just get tired of that kind of attitude. So there's both of those things.
Sorry, Jim, don't mean to cut you off, but this is the thing. I mean, like when we travel, Cody, your situation is a little different because your wife is Filipino and you have a Philippine family, But for me, for example, I'm in Bali, Indonesia right now. I'm a guest. I am a guest. All those years I spent in Thailand, I am a guest. And I'm
still a guest too. I always will be.
But your situation's a little different, but yes, I take your point. But I am a guest, and you're right. You meet these people where it's like, why can't everything be the same as it is back home? Like, we'll go back home.
Exactly.
I think Bill Burr, the comedian, had that great line, like where he was mocking Americans who travel, like, yeah, I enjoyed my trip, but there's so many foreigners over there. It's like, yeah, like if you just want to stay in your little comfort bubble, stay at home. So yes, there's a certain breed of like long-term traveler, the kind of embittered expat who drinks too much of the local cheap beer, who's kind of bitter about the place they live, that just totally turns me off as well. We are guests, always.
See, now I feel like you're talking about me.
I promise that was not a secret dig.
Too much beer. I mean, that's the fun and the challenging thing about travel. I mean, one of many fun and challenging things. But for an example, they say it's more fun in the Philippines, and I think most people often would say that a little bit flippantly, because referring to infrastructure type things, and not being able to afford the same expectation as you would, in the U.S. or wherever. So anyhow, I mean, like for example, this morning I had my own frustration with the water. The water's out, so I get to. But you learn to do things the local way. If you spend long enough, if you actually make local friends, if you look at the culture. I mean, given time, it's amazing what just how people adapt to different situations. And I guess travel has been really good. That's what it made me much more adaptable.
And one more thought on that, but I'd really appreciate the ignorance of not having to understand everything. Like if I think of myself living in America, there's a contract for everything. There's a legal document you have to do in order to do anything, even visit a website now. There's some legality to everything that you have to do. And here, like you're saying, Cody, if the water goes off, I have no idea what's going on. Let me just try to talk to this guy and see if we can get it fixed. I don't have to know what's going on. Just fix it, and then hopefully we can fix it and get it done. And it's sort of like, you know, when you move through the city, if you're walking around Chiang Mai or something, you guys know this too. You know, someone's building a building there, and a cement brick could fall and hit you on the head. And well, that's too bad. That's that's just the way life is, and that's one of the things you have to accept. But I like that kind of elimination of the complexities and the legalities, and you know, all of this kind of all these protections, I guess, that are so prevalent in the West. It's liberating to me.
Almost
Absolutely.
To flip this around for a second, you know, yeah, let's talk shit about our culture, Jim.
Oh, I have no problem with that.
But I do think, you know, like to ride your coattails there, like a construction site, for example. Yeah, I mean the safety precautions and legal protections, things like that, are certainly not anywhere near as developed as they are for us, you know, back in the West. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, obviously that comes with a downside, you know, risk, and sometimes finding yourself in a situation where you don't understand what's going on, and you know, you're probably not going to win if you're going up in a legal battle against like locals, right? A lot of times, but I think, yeah, being through that kind of experience when traveling or living abroad, certainly, like it almost forces us to be more responsible, right?
Exactly.
More,
yeah. More aware of your surroundings,
conscious of, yeah, everything going on around you, more diplomatic, I guess, in your
how you carry yourself. Yeah, absolutely.
So
being respectful of where you are, that's all part of it too.
Yeah, I when I'm traveling around, I always kind of feel like, in a certain sense, I'm an ambassador, not just for Canada, but for all foreigners, you know, because people draw conclusions based on how you act, and they paint, you know, certain races or ethnicities of people with the same brush. You know, that's why everywhere I go, I mean, and of course I've had frustrating days and I've been short with people and I haven't been at my best, but in general, I try to be super kind to like wait staff and taxi drivers, and you know, I really try to act as an ambassador, because you know, it drives me nuts when you see the one guy giving all of us, by all of us, I mean all foreigners, a bad name, either by the way he treats like local women or the way he's treating the waitress or whatever. So yeah, absolutely, we're guests, and in a certain sense, I think we're also ambassadors when we travel.
That's a good point.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, that's a good mindset for all nomads out there. You're an ambassador.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, you know, the state of travel, I guess, since we're delving deep into this issue of travel. You know, yeah, the unavoidable subject right now, of course, is the coronavirus. What is it's Corona-19? Am I getting that right?
COVID-19.
COVID-19. Thank you. Some call it the Wuhan virus.
Well,
okay, so it's not the first.
In Taiwan, they call it the Wuhan virus.
For obvious reasons.
Which is interesting. Yeah.
Well, Jim, and you know, why don't you share a little bit just about the situation, because you do seem like you're very well educated on it. You're up on it. Would you mind sharing? Just, everyone knows generally what's going on, but what's your insight into the situation, being so close to China there?
Well, I mean, I have to be careful because I'm not Chinese, and I'm not Korean, obviously none of that. So I'm no authority. I can just give an outsider's perspective on what I see going on. I think that what's happening in South Korea and what's happening in Taiwan is really admirable. And they've got some experience. They've had some, you know, they've had some previous situations with previous viruses that caused a lot of death and a lot of grief, and they adapted and they adjusted. South Korea started testing everybody that they could to shut it down as much as they could. South Korea is also doing a lot with you know, kind of tracing where people have been and what their contacts have been, and all of that. and that is its own conversation as well. The idea of privacy and maybe some problems associated with that. But in this situation, there's no doubt that it is the government really taking a hands-on approach to things and doing it well. And Taiwan has a similar thing going on. They also are very sensitive to previous outbreaks and things like that, and they've really, kind of closed things down. They're also using data to help with the situation. Just really, it's very, in these kind of situations, I believe, you guys may differ with this, but I believe need to have a strong government that's able to take control, and the people have to have faith in that government. It has to have a good, solid foundation. But with that, you're seeing also a lot of competition among Asian states, among Asian nations. Saying, here's how we're doing it, and so there's a bit of competition going on between these different countries, and you're seeing a bit of sort of, I guess, a little bit of a. I don't want to use the word nationalism because that's a dangerous word, but you are seeing some competition. So that's kind of where things are right now. I think. Again, I am worried about the amount of data that's being drawn from this. I'm concerned about states of exception, which is a concept that has made its way in recent conversations in philosophy. Agamben is one of the guys who, I think he coined that phrase, state of exception. You have to be careful of states of exception that then become normal. So the interesting thing is what's going to happen after this. What is going to be the normal that happens after this? Because the idea of normal is a very fluid thing. So if normal was here, then you get the state of exception that says, okay, now we're here. Then are we going to go back to here? Well, probably not. It's probably a situation that you're going to see right now. So these are concerns that we have to think about politically and socially and as citizens of our own nations, and also sort of to talk about these things of what's going to be the normal when this kind of settles down. That's something I've been thinking about.
That's the part that concerns me. I do think, it's good to see, an active leadership, taking proactive steps. But this is the first time in my whole lifetime I've seen that literally across the globe all at once, and to see it escalate so quickly. Sorry if I take you just a little off track. I want you to kind of keep going with what you're sharing, Jim. But also I wanted to say, it's like, obviously there's a virus out there. I'm not disputing that. Obviously it's a concern, particularly for people who are already sickly or elderly or whatnot, just like the flu is a concern, right? And if you're in a place where it breaks out, I would prefer not to be, right? But here I was in my little world, my corner of the world, and every day, just business as usual, I've been asking around, and so far I haven't found anyone around here, at least, that actually knows anyone with the virus. And so I'm doing my best, just like with all the terrifying news there is on a daily basis, to push back, and to say, like, well, okay, I'm aware, but I'm not going to feed this too much with my fear. I'm not going to try to overreact. And so funny enough, to link it back to another part of our conversation earlier, it was when No Time to Die was postponed. I was like, that caught my attention. It's like, okay, the movie studios are pushing back a really major film that has a huge fan base that's all getting upset, by whatever, 7-8 months. And then other films were pushed back to next year. And then it's the NBA and the NHL and major conferences being canceled. And then, at least for me here locally now, so, I am paying very close attention, to basically the announcements that are coming, like from the mayor's office, the governor's office here, in the Philippines, and looking at what's happening for our community. But I see just from what's being posted online on Facebook, mostly from friends, it does appear like it's on a different timeline, but similar. I do think similar quarantine steps seem to be taking place many places, at least. If it's not in your corner of the world yet, I have a feeling it's probably coming soon. And as you say, Jim, yeah, what did you call it? States of exception?
Yeah, state of exception.
I think it's a good practice, to better safe than sorry, but my mind is there too. It's like there are also some interests at work who who like having a little more orderly community to patrol, or having a little more control over things. And
Here we go. We're going down the rabbit hole. All right.
9/11 was an inside job.
It took us 51 minutes. Here we go.
No, what is the new one? Oh, Epstein didn't kill himself. Okay, so
Right.
Yeah. We got that out there. No, but I mean, are you guys not panicking a little bit? Like, what I'm saying is, like a week ago, I could still maintain that attitude of like, my faith is stronger than the fear being poured into my every corner of my life through the news, through social media, etc. Today, I got to admit, I mean, I'm a father too. I got a lot of people I'm responsible for, but yeah, we've taken a few precautionary steps. I think it's wise at this point for pretty much, if you haven't already, like, get some food, man. Have some stores of something so you can take care of yourself for at least a week, maybe a month. And it's just a weird time. I don't think that's inaccurate to say. It's a very it's a new experience for me.
It's a very strange time. I don't feel like, and maybe I.
Oh, sorry, I just clicked the wrong button. So start with your comment again, Zach. Apologies.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, you asked, like, are we panicking? I mean, speaking for myself, I'm not. I've been rereading for the umpteenth time Meditations by Marcus Aurelius recently, which is kind of one of the foundational texts of Stoic philosophy. I mean, the basic too long didn't read takeaway from Stoic philosophy in general is pay attention to what is within your sphere of influence.
Yes.
And do as little, spend as little time as possible focusing on what is outside of your sphere of influence. Because the more time you just spend fretting and stressing out and sort of, railing against that which is outside of your sphere of influence, the more you're going to suffer and the worse off you'll be. So personally, I'm washing my hands. I'm
finally.
Yeah, finally. It's taken me 32 years, but yeah, I realized that washing hands is good. So that's a good lesson for Zach. But other than that, I mean, I'm going out to dinner and I'm meeting people and I'm, hugging my friend when I see them. And so maybe I'm being irresponsible, but I mean, I can only speak. I'm in Bali right now, and there's something about the virus being less. I've been reading it that it's. It doesn't do well. It doesn't survive as well in this kind of tropical equatorial climate. So there's a part of me that's kind of banking on that. I know the cases in Bali are going up, but basically, I mean, I'm going to try to just, the Jack Cornfield, the Buddhist teacher, says, tend to the part of the garden that you can touch. So I'm trying to tend to the part of the garden that I can touch and just do what I can in my little world to take care of myself. But I'm not going to make drastic changes to my lifestyle. Maybe I should, but I'm not. And I wanted to say something else that is interesting. Like, Jim, you were talking about normalcy, and I mean the big thing that we need to keep in mind is this has happened before. If you look at the 1918 flu pandemic, incredibly deadly, and it's oddly forgotten today. Given the scale and the impact that it had. I mean, we're talking like I forget the numbers, but millions of people died. Something like, I mean, I just heard the numbers yesterday. Something like 300,000 Americans died in a very short time span. The 1918 pandemic, for anyone watching this, who's interested to kind of learn what the situation looks like when it happens to humanity, look up the 1918 flu. It's absolutely remarkable the devastation it caused in the span of 3 or 4 months. But this whole idea of normalcy is kind of interesting to me. I was listening to a podcast, actually a couple of podcasts, which I would strongly recommend for anyone interested in learning more about the pandemic. Sam Harris's podcast, the Waking Up podcast. He's done a couple of podcasts recently on the coronavirus, speaking with experts. And the one expert brought up a really, really interesting example from history that I hadn't considered before. So I believe it was 1940, the Germans were rampaging through Europe. They'd taken France, and they were going to start to bomb England. And they actually announced this, and it was well known. Germany's going to start bombing the hell out of London and other major English cities very soon. There's going to be a drastic departure from normalcy for citizens of the United Kingdom for a while. And the British government was expecting panic. The British government was expecting a mass exodus from urban areas. The government was expecting people to start, fighting for food and supplies because there's this enormous uncertainty. I mean, the Nazis have conquered most of continental Europe, and they're, threatening to conquer England. They're expecting panic. And what happened during the Blitz? People got on with their lives. People kept going to work. People kept shopping, even though every night the Nazis and the Luftwaffe would bomb the hell out of London and other major English cities, and thousands of people died, and there'd be bodies in the street, and there'd be rubble everywhere, and it was absolute chaos. The most drastic departure from normalcy you can imagine, and people got on with their lives. So I don't know. We're an incredibly resilient species, and that's not to underplay the threat or the severity of the virus in any way whatsoever. But we're a very, very, very resilient species, and I don't know. I'm a pretty optimistic person, but I think obviously we're going to pull through. It's not like we risk extinction, but I don't know. I think that as a species, we may be drawing on reserves of strength that we haven't accessed for some time, and that we need to in this time. So, long story short, I don't know. I'm not panicking, and maybe I should be panicking more, but I just don't feel it.
Well, I agree.
Well,
Panic.
I think can I add something to that as well? Sorry to interrupt, but I think it's also important to underscore it. I think you're saying this as well, Zach. But I just wanted to sort of bounce off something you said there. I've been tired. You're in, I think, is fairly safe, right? For people in the States, I think it's really important to stay where you are. I'm not panicking, but I think this people, areas like the States and what's going on in Europe, they're extremely vulnerable right now because they're such open systems. And I would say keep living your life, but I've been listening to the news every day, and I don't usually listen to the news, but right now I am. It's really important, if anybody's watching this in the States, just really isolate yourself as much as you can because of this. I don't know if you guys have heard of this bell curve of what hospitals are capable of taking on in a very concentrated section of time. Like right now, what we need to do is flatten this curve of people getting infected, and the best way is for people to not be with other people. So I think people watching in the States and people watching in Europe, if any are, is to be careful and not go out. Just for now, just read some books and enjoy time with your family and things. Don't go out to movie theaters. Don't go out to restaurants. I mean, I hate to be an alarmist. I'm not panicked at all because what's going to happen is it's going to happen. And then it's going to eventually get into a dormant stage over the summer. I'm predicting. I'm not a scientist, but then it'll rise up again in the fall. But for now, we need to, this is a time of adjustments where institutions are trying to adjust to a very rapidly rising situation. And so the more people are able to isolate themselves, the slower the spread of transmission is going to be. Again, I'm not a scientist, but I would just say, yes, live your life, but just be aware of your contact with other people. I just want to say that.
I would absolutely agree, Jim. And just to be clear, I mean, Cody asked me a personal question, so I'm speaking personally. But I think more importantly than that, and again, I'm not trying to say that I'm taking dumb risks, or I'm planning a trip to Wuhan anytime soon. Or, I mean, obviously not. But again, I would say don't listen to me, don't listen to Jim. Listen to like the local authorities where you are, and pay attention to what they're telling you, because we live in this weird moment where, with not to go down this rabbit hole at all, but like with Trump and with all these things, there's this anti-expert sentiment that the experts never know what they're talking about, and they're all bought and sold, and it's big pharma and it's big this. And it's like, no, sometimes experts are actually extraordinarily useful. And this is one of those times. So I'd say whatever like the national health authorities in your country are telling you, I don't know, we could go down the conspiracy theorist rabbit hole, but my opinion is their job is to try to keep us relatively healthy and safe and prevent the spread of this as much as possible. So I would say don't listen to me, don't listen to Jim, don't listen to Cody. Listen to what the people in your country are telling you to do, whether it's the mayor or the national health authorities, whatever. Absolutely. Exactly, yeah. And again, I can only speak personally. Frankly, I think I'd feel more concerned if I was, in Idaho or something right now. It seems to be more severe, as certainly in Europe. They say that Europe is the center of the pandemic right now. So I'm not sure if it's ironic, but ironically here in Asia, where I'm much closer to China and the epicenter of the outbreak, I don't know, I feel safer here.
It seems that it feels like, what I've seen, it almost appears like China and other nearby nations are starting to get it under control already. I mean, I'm hopeful.
Yeah. I think the numbers are declining in China, right? And like more and more people are recovering.
Yeah, but I think elsewhere, like they're still just catching up with what's happening. And what was that, Jim?
Well, the governments are more equipped. They've had this experience before, and it's been a long time for Europe and the United States.
Yeah,
this is still fresh in Asia's mind.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Just to share a little bit from my personal experience sitting over here in the Philippines right now. I mean, I was, like I said earlier, I was not really concerned about the virus itself, like being, a direct impact for me or my family, because up until a day or two ago, there were allegedly still 0 cases on this whole island. I mean, I was concerned at first because Bohol is like the #1 tourist demographic that come here are straight from China. And so, early on I was thinking, like, if it's going to show up anywhere, it probably will show up here in the Philippines. But it was surprising, like, didn't seem like there was very much here for quite a while. But yeah, as you said, Zach, it's like, it depends where you are in the world. Yeah, because that's how it's going to play out. But yeah, I do think it's a time to pay a little more. It's like, it's so hard to toe that line. I try not to saturate myself in all the media, because it's a little depressing, I guess. But definitely, yeah, pay attention to like local government, mayor, whatever. But what I saw happen here, one day the president signed an order, just saying like, we're not going to accept any incoming flights from China and I think a few other nations. And then, they were keeping an eye on the, I forget what they call it, but people who they think might have the virus, keeping an eye on the numbers on every island across the Philippines. Manila, I think it was the mayor of Manila recently, said like, we're going to shut down most travel in and out. And, these things make sense as a response. But also, to go back to something you said earlier, Jim, it's like, yeah, you may be free to leave if necessary. But I also would caution people, if you happen to, like, we can't control any of these things, right? And I pray for everyone out there watching that it doesn't impact you too much. But I do think, like, it's likely, Italy is pretty much shut down. I spoke with a friend there yesterday. It appears like Spain is pretty much going under quarantine. And yeah, here it escalated so quickly. And even though our island of Bohol has had 0 confirmed cases yet, they have 2 people under suspicion right now. But the provincial governor also a day or two ago said basically they're putting our entire island under lockdown. It's an island about the size of Hawaii, the big island. And same issue here. It's like, okay, so if need be, now's the time to get out. Like they'll let you out, but once you're out, you can't come back in. And that's where I would just caution people. It's like, if you are going to find yourself in a quarantine situation, having to wait out, like, I don't want to be doing this. Nobody wants to be doing this. But if this is what we're all doing, I think it was Justin Cook, you know him, Zach, a friend of ours, said it's like kind of the time to at least be thinking about, where do you want to go into monk mode for a while, hunker down at the very least. And, in my instance, we were actually expecting my parents, like in a few days, right here. They were supposed to come visit the Philippines for the first time. But because of, they were in mid-travel and my dad has some health concerns, etc., like basically that whole plan was scrapped overnight because of the steps taken by the mayor and the governor here. And, similar things are going on back home in California as well. It's, it's going to have an impact on a lot of people's businesses.
Just to continue my perhaps naive optimism, a couple thoughts I've had in terms of a potential, oh my God, it feels ridiculous to call it an upside, but some potential, potentially good things that could come out of this is, one, I hope a lot of good art comes out of this, because so many interesting creative people are being forced to sort of stay in their studios or in their offices or in their whatever. I hope some good art comes out of this. The other thought I had too, just bringing the conversation back around, we were talking about social media earlier. I mean, I wonder if the aftermath of this experience of so many of us having to spend, and so many people, particularly in Europe and America now, spending, weeks in relative isolation with nothing to keep them company really but their phones and their Facebook feeds and their Instagram feeds. I wonder, if after this, there will be at least a brief moment of people really valuing skin-to-skin contact and human connection and meeting people face-to-face and having conversations and dialogues face-to-face rather than, mediated through screens. I wonder if there'll be some kind of nice, if brief, renaissance of just the value of actual human physical contact and, actually meeting up with your friends rather than texting them for ages, that would be nice. Don't you think?
That's a good point, Zach. And for some reason, you just conjured a metaphor of some kind of like vortex that we're caught in, that is this virus that everybody's caught in, and it's sort of sucking us in. But what it's sucking us into is not just the virus itself, it's everything else in the way we live and things like that. So what we're being drawn down to or pulled down into is also the way we live our lives. And I'm glad you said that about creating art. I heard someone else talking about this as well. I'm trying to remember where I heard it, but from this, in different points in history, usually there's some kind of art movement that comes out of situations like this. There's some kind of movement of expression that changes things, and I think we are going to come out of this changed. And as far as social media, I have a very difficult relationship with social media myself. But yeah, we'll just have to see what comes out of this. I mean, we're all being pulled down into this situation, and we could despair about it, and we could freak out. But it's also like a seed to go through, a time of reflection, that maybe out of this is going to bloom something very interesting. I think that business is going to be forever changed. The travel industry is going to be forever changed. A lot of the way that we interact with people is going to be changed. So we're just going to have to see what comes out of this, at the same time that we have to be careful while we're in it.
Yeah. I pray it's, going to be as short-lived as possible. But yeah, I do think obviously the travel industry is closing down around us right now in a large part. And yeah, I think, I would encourage people, if possible, to try to be near home or at least loved ones, I mean, yeah, social distancing is a good idea, but at least be near someone, you know, if you can be, right? But like community.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but this is the other part of it. What you're getting at right now is some people are divided from the people that they care about, and I'm one of those.
Right.
You know, so it's that adds its own kind of difficult aspect to it, but also out of that comes its own possibility for narrative, and you know, there's a lot of stories that are being written right now, that are or that are being lived right now that are not written yet. Yes. And we're going to see stories come out of this situation, and it's, you know, history does this to us sometimes. It
like you said, it's part of the cycle. Yeah, and we need it. We need crisis and some struggle.
There's no story without conflict, right? And we've all gotten very comfortable with our online lives, and you know, kind of expressing ourselves through screens and text and images and stuff like that, and now we're seeing a very imminent kind of way that we're having to deal with our relationship to each other and our relationship to the world, and in some cases being divided from the people we love, and there's going to be stories to come out of this. So,
well, on a much smaller scale, and again, I don't mean to underplay the severity of this crisis. I mean, I can only think about winter in Canada. So if you're in most of Canada, there's several months where the cold is so extreme, and it's just unbearable, at least for me. And what happens then is most of us stay inside, and we have less social contact and less connection, and we plan our trips to maximize our groceries and our whatever to get back home where it's warm as soon as possible. And particularly in major Canadian cities where it's really cold, you know, there's this brief moment in the early spring where there's a real sense of just gratitude for seeing our friends and meeting up for a drink on the patio. And there's a real sense of, just gratitude that's actually quite pleasant in the, you know, sort of the hangover, the aftermath of this absolutely horrific Canadian winter. So it'd be nice if there's something akin to that happens or that comes out of this experience.
Yeah. Well, I definitely plan to. I mean, that's part of why I really appreciate you guys joining me. I mean, I hope to do a lot more of these kind of experiences and conversations with my friends, no matter where they are, you know, even though it is the screen. But I think I hope one good element that will come out of a temporary quarantine, at least for me here, like I'm gonna try to keep in touch with, you know, my friends and loved ones more, and foster hopeful conversations. Like, I totally appreciate your angle on this, Zach, and I agree. It's like you got to have a little bit of both, a little caution, not panic, but pay attention to the right information sources so you know what's going on around you, but also be hopeful. And as you have both pointed out, this is going to be a brilliant time, I think, for artists, you know, who that's what they do, like you guys. Like, hopefully this is I said to Jim on Facebook the other day, monk mode challenge, you know. It's like if you're going to be under isolation, figure out a project, you know, and focus your energies as much as you can on something productive.
Yes.
I push everyone, you know, to seek out other creative outlets. But go ahead, guys.
Go ahead, Zach.
I was just going to say that I guarantee that there are a lot of writers and creative people in general having panic attacks right now, because the hardest part of writing is planning your ass in a seat and actually writing. Like, just making the time and getting there, and no more excuses, and you don't have to do the dishes, and your laundry's fine. Just friggin' write. Sit there and write. There's an absolutely fantastic book on this called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, which any creative person, if I was going to recommend one book, it would be that one. And so for a lot of us now, it's like, what is our excuse? Right? We're encouraged to stay at home. We're not allowed to go out. Our internet's working well. What's the excuse now, right? Like, there's really no more public
gatherings. You got nowhere to go.
Yeah. What is our excuse not to write now, not to be productive?
That's precisely where I am right now. You know, when you were here not too long ago, Zach, I told you a little bit about kind of my ideas I've been wanting to write a book for quite a while, which is another reason why I look up to you both. But that's precisely where I'm at. And one of the positives, as twisted as it may be, is I'm kind of excited. Like, forced monk mode. You know, if I'm gonna have to be at home, as you say, it's like now I got to sit in front of this keyboard every day, and hopefully this will finally force me to do my writing project.
Well, yeah, go for it. I'd do it. I mean, now is a good time. You're right. And you know, there's a metaphor here for kind of like what's going on right now, and the idea of self-isolation. It could be, you can think of it as a kind of depression in a way. It not a clinical depression, but in the sense that you're isolated. What's the best way to get out of a feeling of feeling stuck? And for me, throughout my life, what I need to get out of a funk or a feeling of being trapped is a project. And I almost think of the word with a capital P. Yeah. Work on projects. It's really, if you're feeling in a bad state of mind, if you're feeling isolated, a project will save your fucking life. It really will. So I would say everybody out there, find a project and work on it.
Yeah, that's very well put. There's a tweet that I think about constantly. The Swiss philosopher Alain de Botton, who runs a brilliant organization called the School of Life, very, very highly recommended. But he put out this tweet years ago, and I screen grabbed it, and I have it on my desktop, or I had it on my desktop for years. And it's something like, you know, we can have vacations, and we can have sex, and we can have food and all this stuff, but the only cure for what truly ails us is work. And there's a lot of truth to that as far as I'm concerned. You know, when I've gone through really, really, really dark periods in my life where losing loved ones or breakups or whatever, I completely agree, Jim. Like, the thing that has saved me is having something useful to work on. You know, like for me, like I can write different things and focus on different projects. But even just to put a finer point on what you're saying, for me at least, what I find most helpful is like working on a project that I know is going to be useful to some people. You know, something that's actually going to create some good in the world. And yeah, that has saved my life on more than one occasion for sure.
And what you're going to find when you do that is that every day you're going to have something's going to change in the way you're thinking about whatever it is you're working on. So every day it's almost going to be, you know, it's going to be a different day, rather than the doldrums of every day feeling like it's the same. When you're working on a project, you have a breakthrough every day. And like you said, Zach, you have to sit down. If it's a book, for example, you have to sit down and you have to write. And that's the hardest thing to do in writing a book, is sitting down and writing. And once you start clacking the keys on the keyboard, it happens. But you just have to sit down and do it. And then every day, at the end of every day, you're going to go, oh, my mind went in this direction today. And then, you know, the next day, your mind's going to go in a different direction. So you've got some kind of change happening in your life. And yeah, I'm glad you said that. Something that's it's having something that really speaks to someone, that makes them think about their lives differently. And that stories are a way of sort of drawing people in and moving them along that path of thinking differently, you know, about the way they live their life. I'm kind of conflating two ideas here, but something useful that you can actually, you know, help yourself work through is a good combination, I think.
A couple other points, if you guys will permit me, about writing that I find helpful is the one metric that I think about sometimes. Actually, I got from famous lifestyle entrepreneur Tim Ferriss of 4 Hour Workweek fame. He had this line about when he sits to write, his bar for success is, he says, I'm going to write 2 shitty pages. And there's something kind of interesting going on there, because you set the bar so low, right? Anyone, like a monkey clacking away at a keyboard, could turn out 2 shitty pages. But when you sit down, you say, okay, I don't feel like writing. I've got all this stuff I need to do, but at least I'm going to just put 2 pages that are whatever. Then, of course, the natural instinct is, well, I want to make this good, and I want to make this interesting, and I'm going to try. Like, if I'm doing this anyway, I have to try. But just kind of like having the mindset of setting that low bar, I find helpful sometimes, because I am far from an expert or the most consistent writer in the world when it comes to this stuff, but I find that helpful. Another thing I find helpful is the old line from Ernest Hemingway, probably my favorite novelist. And he says, when you're stuck on writing, just write the truest sentence you know. like if you put a gun to each one of our heads, we could think of something that we know in our heart to be very, very true, and we could put that down on the screen. So I find that helpful as well. Like if I'm stuck or whatever, I don't know where I'm going with what I want to write, just start, what's the truest sentence you know in this moment? And, just go from there.
Those are all very good pieces of advice. Thank you both.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Do I hear a call to prayer there? That must be
Yes,
Zach, right?
I don't know if you. So I'm actually situated near a mosque here in Bali, and I hear the call to prayer several times a day, which I quite like. I mean, it's inconvenient when you're recording a live video podcast, but actually I quite like it. Yeah, everywhere I am in the world, I'm always there's something comforting about it. I can't quite explain why, and I'm not a Muslim, but yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah. I like it too, unless you're very close to it, and sometimes it's more aggressive than other times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, it's very fascinating to me to hear writers, professional writers, talk about their creative process. So thank you for sharing some really good pieces of advice, both of you guys. I know I don't want to keep you guys all day. But closing thoughts, do you have any other ideas or tips to add for others, that would like to follow in your footsteps in a way, whether through writing career or just pursuing a creative profession, or just thoughts for people at this time right now on the value of art and narrative in our lives and ways we can find more empowering narrative, hopefully, than disempowering.
Why don't you go ahead, Jim, and I'm going to wait to see if the call to prayer ends here.
Well, I would say let's put it in the context of this time right now. Normally I might say, and whatever, experience different things. Maybe in a time of reflection like this, I would just encourage people to read a lot of books, and try to stay off the internet as much as possible. In terms of creativity, see some films, do a lot of reading, and do some difficult reading. Zach mentioned the Stoics, and that's a good one. But I would just say, read as much as you can. Take this time to sort of go back old school and do some. What happens for me in terms of the kind of writing that I do is reading leads to me writing. Something will inspire that into my thought, and then that will turn into the production of writing. You don't have to think of it that practically. Just sit on your porch and read a book. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I've been trying to read a lot more. Yeah, now that I've decided, I want to pursue my own writing projects much more, make that a bigger priority in my life. But yeah, you got to first kind of feed yourself with good examples and lots of good ideas. So.
And I would just say Allahu Akbar first off. And but beyond that, at the risk of sounding cheesy, it's all about love and human connections. And I think we're in people are feeling vulnerable. We're in a kind of a vulnerable feeling moment as a species. So I'm just speaking personally. I'm not trying to be prescriptive, but I'm going to try to be a little kinder to people. I'm going to try to be a little more accepting of just my neighbors in general. I'm going to try to love the people I care about a little more, and show them more patience and gratitude. Because I think, I regardless of how I sounded earlier, there's a lot of us feeling some sense of anxiety and unease, particularly if they're in the real hotspots for this illness. So just try to be kind, I would say. And in terms of any type of, if you're lacking professional direction or creative direction, again, I would just come back to what I kind of try to use as my North Star is, how can I be useful? There's a really good podcaster called Scott Galloway who talks about rather than following your passion, following your talent. And I think that's actually pretty good advice. Not that passion isn't important, but like, what are you good at? You know, how can you help people and how can you be useful, whether it's in terms of your creative expression or anything else. So yeah. And again, I have to come back to the line of one of my favorite lines ever, the Buddhist teacher, Jack Kornfield, tend to the part of the garden you can touch. So that's what I'm going to try to do during this period.
I really love that, Zach.
Also,
yeah, thank you for sharing that. Go ahead.
But then also be careful who you're touching.
Yeah, right. That's a very good point.
You could love people.
That's a very good point. Yes.
I hope we get through this as quickly as we possibly can, because I don't want to take the humanity out of my life or anyone's life. But in the meantime, as I was saying, I do hope to double down on my own creative pursuits and like my output of publishing just content, photography and written content and video like this. And I really appreciate having both you guys as really my first guests for this kind of experience. Speaking of projects, at one point when I first started building this new community, I kind of had the hazy title, just the Hero Project. Because as you touched on earlier, Jim, like, yeah, particularly if you're going through like a depressive episode or have some, major life adjustment to make, yeah, a lot of people go through that kind of transition, and having a project, even if it's nothing beyond just working on yourself, if you can't think of something bigger, more meaningful that will touch other lives, as you say, Zach, but, yeah, start with your sphere of influence, as you guys touched on, figure out something that matters to you. And so, many of you who will be watching this video, you're probably already in there, but if not, look for the Hero Project group on Facebook. And I'm thinking, I would love to do this, with both of you individually or together many more times, I hope. But let's try to, keep in touch. And yeah, I would really love to foster a continuing conversation, hopefully under a little bit more positive, subtext next time. But I think I'm thinking of calling this the Hero Project Podcast, because I really love and appreciate having people like yourselves, who have gone through your journey and all the trials and challenges of that, and stuck with your project, and you've produced something of value to share with the world. So I think you guys are both great examples, and yeah, thank you both for sharing. And I hope we can do it again and pick up the conversation again very soon.
Thank you. This was fun. Thanks, guys.
I really appreciate both of you guys. Any last final parting words? And let us know at least where can people find you? Each of you.
People can find me in Kaohsiung. No.
Say your website, Jim.
I don't. Oh, my website. Okay.
Jim Batcho.
This is Gen X here telling you to go to my website. One more last thing.
Buy my cassette. You can buy my cassette down at Blockbuster, and
no, it's not. It's still only 8-track.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so JimBatcho.com. I'll include anything else I can point people to?
No, that's it.
Yeah. Really quick, give a little byline for Terrence Malick's Unseeing Cinema. Is that right?
Yeah. I guess I should pitch my book, shouldn't I? Yeah, I have a book on Paul Gray McMillan called Terrence Malick's Unseeing Cinema, Memory Time. It's about seeing cinema from a audible sense of hearing and listening, their connection with memory. If Terrence Malick's a reader of philosophy, you might enjoy it.
Nice. those are some of the
That's it.
things I would love to delve more into the next time we get an
How was that as a
opportunity.
pitch?
That was beautiful. See, you can do this.
That was a good pitch. Jim, we didn't get to talk about Terrence Malick's new film. Maybe next time. Yeah, I'm at retroactivejealousy.com.
I haven't seen.
Oh, you haven't? Okay. My podcast is called Humans in Love. You can learn more at humansinlove.com. I have a book called Overcoming Retroactive Jealousy. And yeah, my main sort of website where I talk about dating, relationships, personal development is retroactivejealousy.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys both very much. And yeah, for both of you and everyone listening and watching, wherever you guys are in the world, I wish everyone the best. Stay safe, be smart, but we'll all make it through this. And yeah, I hope
only you can prevent forest fires.
Only you can prevent coronavirus. I hope
exactly.
to be in close touch with all of you guys, though. Yeah, I guess this will give us
Thanks for doing
to share more.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for being here. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Bye,
you
guys.
too. Bye-bye.
Good to see you, Jim.